Labor, the Greens and the climate independents have said, don't worry, we'll fight global warming now, really fight it. It's not going to hurt you one little bit. In fact, Monique Ryan, who beat Josh Frydenberg in Kooyong, the Treasurer, said, it's not going to cost a cent. Not a cent. Really? Let me now quote one of the billionaires who helped fund the climate independence, Mike Cannon-Brookes. He's taken a big share of our biggest electricity supplier, AGL, and he says he wants to close its coal-fired power stations early. And last week he said, don't worry, AGL can still make money by making people who go 100% green power at home, delivering finance products to them to help customers fund approximately, get this, to help customers fund approximately $100,000 just of capital expenditure to electrify their homes. Now, this man, who himself lives in Sydney's most expensive house, $100 million, said the rest of us can pay $100,000 to turn gas appliances into electric, for instance, to buy an electric car, to get batteries and so on, to go green. And that doesn't even include the price of the electricity, which is going to rise with all the green energy. $100,000 per house. Joining me is Kosha Gada, who's a commentator, entrepreneur and tech executive. Kosha, thank you so much for your time. Cannon-Brookes, who could soon control our biggest electricity supplier, a plan for Australians to spend $100,000 for every home to go green. That's more than $800 billion all up. Small price to pay for saving the planet, or is it barking insane?
Hi, Andrew. Good to be with you. So look, I think there are two lenses through which to look at the story. One lens is the commercial business economic lens. And, the situation here is ADL is under a lot of financial pressure right now. Their profits are down 34% over the past year. Their stock price is down by half over the past 2 years. And so they're in the middle of executing a turnaround strategy. And the centerpiece of the strategy is they believe there needs to be a demerger and a slow transition towards expanding the proportion of renewable energies in their portfolio, something more measured and, in line with where the technology is. Now, Cannon-Brookes has become an activist investor because he's been able to acquire 11% of the company, and that gives him a big platform and bully pulpit. And he contends that there is another way, which is really the financialization of the energy sector. And what that means, without getting into the weeds too much for viewers, is since the demand, true natural demand for renewable energies just simply is not at the level that the activists or government proponents want it to be, there's this whole sort of other economy that's come up around that, where there's all sorts of government incentives and schemes and tax credits and whatnot that benefit that. Tesla is the biggest beneficiary of that, where 20% of their profits actually come from the sale of carbon credits, not even from the products that they make. And I think what Cannon-Brookes sees from an economic perspective is there is a window to make money here and take advantage of all these government schemes and make a buck while doing it. The second lens, though, is the cultural and political lens that you touched on in that, and that's where all the stuff that we've seen where elites are out of touch with the reality and what $100,000 means to the everyday Australian. And I don't know which of those two lenses color his motivation, but that's certainly part of the puzzle as well.
But Kosha, the basic point is, whatever his plans to make AGL money, people, he thinks, will need $100,000 per house to go green. And that is before they even pay for their electricity bills. People don't have $100,000 to go green. Some people balk at having to pay $10,000 for solar panels. This is $100,000 per house. This is what I'm saying. They're telling us it'll cost nothing. Here is a guy who actually helped fund the climate independence saying, correction, $100,000 just for your house to go green.
Yeah, I think, that if it hits the bottom line of everyday Australian households, it's dead on arrival. It wouldn't happen. He's since walked it back. His investment arm, Grok, has walked it back. And they're trying to say that it's there's financial jiu-jitsu in that where it wouldn't be covered by the household, because I think absolutely your point that nobody would ever buy into that. And it's untenable if that's really what it ends up being.
Yeah, and this is the guy that wants to control AGL, our biggest electricity supplier. I just find this frightening. Guys, wake up to this, people. You're hearing it from the man himself. Wake up to what they actually think when they don't realise quite the political implications of what they're saying. Now, Kosha, Albanese is not mentioned cost of living pressures in his victory speech. He did say, look, he'd try to get productivity up and wages, but cost of living pressures didn't mention. I actually think they're going to be one of his biggest threats. What do you see coming down the highway that could throw this government sideways?
You know, this one, Andrew, is interesting because I read his speech, the transcript in its entirety, and it had the obligatory thanking the traditional custodians of the land, talking about his personal story growing up with a single mother, you know, heralding the multiculturalism benefits of the Australian electorate, et cetera, and not a word about cost of living, as you mentioned. And I think the reason for that is it is a cut and dry political calculation that he and his counterparts in liberal democracies everywhere are making, and that is really deprioritizing their traditional base of the working class and the labor class, for whom this cost of living really strikes at the heart of their household much more steeply, and moving towards a different coalition of millennials, new minorities, you know, suburban women, elites, et cetera, that don't actually have a lot in common. But if they can successfully stitch that coalition together, and people have done that in other liberal democracies, they can actually deprioritize the working class and the issues that matter to them, such as the cost of living. So I think it's a cut and dry political calculation, and I'm not surprised that he did not touch on it in his speech for that reason.
Well, all the more reason for the Liberals to reinvent themselves as the party of the battlers. Kosha, just quickly, we've only got half a minute to go. I think one of the big things is going to sideswipe them. For instance, Liddell Power Station coal-fired is going to shut down entirely in 2023, next year in April, and in 3 years' time, Eraring, our biggest generator by far, that's going to close as well. Shortage of electricity, higher power prices, that's coming.
It absolutely is, and you know, the people that we talked about in the previous segment are only accelerating that, the activists around climate, and you know, you nailed it, where this is a huge, wide opportunity for people from the other side, the Liberal Party, to seize upon this and really offer higher contrast on their policy prescriptions around this issue, because people are thirsty for it,
absolutely.
And those coal mining country are absolutely thirsty for it, and somebody needs to address their concerns.